Hey everyone, welcome back. I want to go through the Figma UI, mostly the structure of the dashboard over here, where we are currently. It's where you're going to start from when you open your Figma. Now we have a navigational bar right here, where you can search your account over here. You can even have one or more accounts, which you can switch in between. We got a notification bell over here. Whenever you share a file to the community and comments are made on that file notification, it will show up over here. If you want to access more things about your account, you can do this over here, like adding extra accounts, which you can switch them on this side or even getting the desktop app. So that is the navigational bar. Then we go into the sidebar. Yes, the sidebar. The sidebar is made up of a bunch of different things. We have your recent, where you're going to be accessing all the files that you are recently opened. You have your draft here. Yes, draft. This is where all your files are going to stay. Note, if you don't have a professional plan, majority of your files are going to stay right here instead of being organized or group orderly. You can have favorite files. Like if I go back to my recent here, you can see that I have starred a couple of file over here, which marks as being my favorite. And they will all show up here. Now, these are the files. You can click them to open up a new tab, or you can right click them to see all the different options available to you. Whether you want to share or copy a link, you can remove it from your favorites, that is unfavorite them, or duplicate, and so on. You can even start a new design file right from here, draft or recent. And that is the easiest way to do that over here. And that is your Figma dashboard. Hello guys, let's talk about tools. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new design file by clicking on it, which will take us to our tab. And we're going to name this test tools. Now I'm going to show you a bit about Figma and all the things that you see here. So over here, we got the tabs, which gives you a quick overview of what we are working on. Also, note we can have multiple tabs opened. Up here is the toolbar. So let's start from the left. This is the menu, which may not be used that much. But one of the helpful thing here is going into the help account and going into the keyboard shortcuts, which is going to pop up, and we're going to open a shortcut tab right at the bottom here. That will help me think about how do I access something like the pen tool, the text tool, the select all, and the so on. This is nice because you will be able to get all this information right within the app, which is super helpful, very, very helpful. So I'm going to close that for now. So now that is the menu, and this is the way you're going to access all your tools. So we have our basic tools up here. We have move and the scale tool. We have your frame and slicing tool. But the frames are more important. Frames are like a canvas. Yes, a canvas where you draw things on. Now we got our shapes, tools, which we use to design logos and other things that come to mind. Like the rectangle, line, arrow, the ellipse, the polygon shape, and others. This is your pen tool, the pen tool. The text tool, which is useful when you want to write something. So you can see we can write anything we want to write. And we have the hand tool for moving things around. As you see, I can move this, I can put it anywhere, left or right. Then you have things like conceptual tools. So let's say I have a rectangle and we create a copy of that rectangle, which is shown on the left side here using Command C. We use Ctrl C in the Windows and we use Ctrl V to paste. Join together, then I can see my conceptual tool. So over here, we have components, which is a little bit advanced for now. I'm not going to talk about that yet. What we're going to talk about is masking. We have masking, which allows you to create shapes and hide different aspects of other shapes. We have the Boolean tool, which gives you Boolean operation like subtract, selection. And as you can see, it takes a chunk out. So there's a lot of cool things up there. Just play around with them. This is our share button, where we're going to share our work to the community or friend and the team members. And anyone with a link can view or edit it. And that is how you can copy the link. And you can also play prototype. For example, if I want to take a frame, I'm going to press F to make that frame. I'm going to select an iPhone 13 Pro frame and just put one of my text layer over there. And I'm going to place that there for now. And when I press play, I'm going to open up that prototype tab for us to see. And that is the toolbar. Everyone, I want to talk about the left sidebar. So you will see that I'm not in my test file anymore. This is what it looked like before. It was kind of a mess. So I think it's probably best that we look at a real file that has a bit more structure to it. So you can understand what the left side looks like. So I'm just going to pop this out and we are going to talk about this area, the left sidebar. So the left sidebar is where you're going to find layers. There's different types of layers here. You can find frames, there's groups, there's components right here. This is what a frame looks like. And this is an auto layout frame. These are the different types of shapes. So this is a line shape, which is horizontal rule that is going to the right across. You can see it's highlighted. You have groups or different types of layers. So if I were to make this a component real quick, that's what component would look like. Or a master component, if I make a copy of it. That is what an instance of a master component would look like. So I'm just going to backpedal over here so we don't get too deep in the weeds there. But essentially, there's so many different types of layers. You can have shapes, images. I mean, they are all going to show up differently right here, just based off the icon. And this is where we're going to find them. And you will see some of them are evenly nested. So this is the header area. And within the header area, I have like the navigation for this design. And within the navigation, I have like the main navigation with these different options over here. And if I click this little arrow, I can see all those different options. And essentially, you can nest different types, and that's how Figma works. They allow you to nest frames within frames or shapes within groups. It makes it really easy for you to understand and where things are and kind of take the approach like a developer as how to structure some of your content, like within containers and so on. So that's how nesting works. And the easiest way to do that is I'm just going to take a rectangle. So I'm just going to click the rectangle tool. I'm going to take a rectangle, and over here we see my special rectangle. I can take that and put that within my header area. So you can just drag them into wherever you would like, and they will show up accordingly. So I'm just going to quickly delete that by pressing my delete key, or you can press your backspace key, and that is how you get rid of the layer. So you can easily right click on the layer and see all the different options you have for it. Or you can even do that over here if you would like. You can right click on a certain layer and get those same options. By doing that here, you can drag them, reorder them, you can even delete them by pressing the backspace. So that is essentially it on how to use them within the sidebar. But you can also double click and I can rename it to be called Cool Logo instead. So now that is one is renamed. So that is really, really great here. That is just like an easy way to rename a file. I love naming all the different aspects of my file just so it's nice and clear for me to come back to it. Even share it with others so they understand what they are looking at. When I see things that are like frame 1, 2, 3, 4, it gets really messy. It gets really messy. And if you just make new copies, they mean nothing. They just mean frame 1, frame 2, and frame 3. And it's really hard to follow that. So I'm just going to delete that really quick. Okay. So that is how you rename layers and nest layers. You can also lock them, which I find really helpful. Sometimes you want to work on something, and in this instance, let's say we don't want to touch the navigation. So on the left, just click over here. You can also see the little icon and hide the icon. I'm going to lock the header. Yeah, you can't move the header anymore. So that's really great. If you're working with like layers that are over one another, you can easily hide it too. If you just don't want to see it at the moment, or lock it. So there are different options there. You can also do that by the right clicking and going to the bottom. These are the shortcuts. Ctrl Shift L on Windows and Shift Command O on Mac OS. And that is how you lock and unlock layers. There's also another aspect of this sidebar. So right now, I showed you layers. Now there's an access. You can come in here and create components. We have so much assets. So an example is if I take this logo or this button, which is actually probably a way better example. So if I take this button and I'm just going to drag a copy by holding options on my Mac. But if I just take this button and turn it into a component, it shows up in my local components. And then I can drag them from there. And now I have a responsive button that I can use anywhere. But that is how you would use your assets panel. And you can use components from other libraries or other projects. Other people can also share libraries with you, but this is a great way to use reusable components. Remember, if you are on a startup plan, you won't be able to use components that extensively. You will only be able to make components within your file, like I just did, and use them. I'm going to grab the logo here that we made or that I made. We're going to make this later, but I'm going to grab this logo over here and I'm going to turn it into a component. And now that logo is there. So you can use your local components, but you won't be able to access components beyond that, unfortunately. And that is the assets panel. The last thing I did want to talk about, though, is the pages. So you go back to your layers and you can see over here you're on the landing page, or I am on the landing page. You can see all the different types of pages here by just clicking this little drop down, and I can add a new page and it's going to create a new canvas for me over here. But if I go back here, I have that canvas. If I go back here, I have my cover canvas. So you can move through all these different pages as you see fit. And you can create new pages. Remember, there is a limitation to the starter plan. I believe it's only 3 pages within a file, which isn't too bad, to be honest. Many people won't really exceed that. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Let's jump right in it because we're going to talk about the right sidebar. Now, the right sidebar is really where you're going to do a lot of work. So let's jump right in it. So I am just going to click on this frame over here. The landing page frame that's housing all of this content is going to have a bunch of different things on the side here. You will notice that this is your alignment and distribution up here. For example, I can take these three things and select them all, and then you can tidy them up just by moving them to the top or making them all come to the middle. As you can see, you can space them out separately by clicking this over here. So distribute like horizontally the same way. And yeah, you can align them easily. So that's where you're going to get your alignment and distribution. You can also see your frame size or just the size and orientation of your layer. So I have the X, the Y, that's where it's positioned. I also have the width of the frame. I have the height of the frame. I have the angle. You can turn things if you want. So I can just throw a 90 over here. I'm just going to go back, Command C or Control Z, depending on what system you're on. You can even set a border radius up here so you can see that the border radius has been smoothed in all corners. And that is basically all of your frame size. Your orientation, you have your position on the canvas, the X and Y values up here. You have your dimensions, which is the width and the height. To talk about is the constraints. So we have our resizing options over here. So this one is set to fill, and you can hug the content. You can see how that kind of messes up the frame a bit. We'll get into this in much more details, but this is where it's located. You can fix the height of this so it's a set height. You can clip your content. So if I were to go like this, you can see that that content is not showing anymore because it's set to clip. So you can hide content beyond the frame. That's where all of that is going to be. And another interesting thing is your constraints. Well, actually, let's go back here. So if I select my hero frame, constraints are going to show up here because constraints can only show up within a regular frame. I will get into that later, but this is what constraints look like. So left and right and top and bottom are for your vertical and your horizontal constraints. So if I move the landing page like this, it's going to shrink with it. If I move it like this, it's going to shrink with that as well. So those are your constraints. If you have an auto layout frame, these are where your auto layout details are going to be. So we'll get into that later as well. You have the ability to create layout grids if you are into creating grids. So you can create grids if you want. You have your layers properties, whether it's to pass through or darken, kind of like a Photoshop a bit. And then the ability to set your fill. So if I press the plus button, I can create new things, new fills in here. I can also select this filter. It's turned off by default, but I can select it and color it any way I want, and I can remove it. You have your stroke. You can set a stroke. You can see a stroke that just showed up on the outside, which is like a border. So you have all your selection of colors. You have your effects. You can select like drop shadow in a shadow. This is basically your bread and butter. You can even export your screen from here as PNG. You can do it as PDF, SVG, and JPEG. So lots of options for you there. You will notice that text has its own as well. So a text has its own properties, and you can really dig deep into those properties. The other part of this tab you have designed is your prototype, and they are really great. And this is how you would create flows together. If I have two screens and I link them up together in some way, like if I click on that screen, it goes to the next. I have created a prototype and then I have accessed it by clicking play. I can also see a bunch of different things. I can choose the interaction, so whether it's on click or whether it's on hover or while I'm pressing. And once I have chosen the interaction, I can choose the destination, where it's going to go. So just one frame to the next, and then you can choose the animation. You can choose move in, you can choose smart animate, and it will give you some cool bouncy effects that you can see, that you can use. So there's a lot of cool things that you can play with over here. Another thing is you can define a lot of things like devices that you may see, whether it's like 11 or 13 Pro. And you can customize that all here as well. So that's where you do your prototyping stuff. And that is the right sidebar. Hey everyone, I want to jump right into frames. So frames are very important for creating UI in Figma. So this is where the frame tool is. You could easily create a frame by pressing F. So if I just press F, I have already have the tool selected over here. I want to just point this out really quickly because when you do create a frame, you are going to see the ability to create a frame based off the phone size or a tablet size or even a desktop size. So you can create the frame based off that. You can also just draw it on the board on the canvas area. So I can just draw a large frame like that and it automatically going to say frame 1. I'm going to go back really quickly. But if I select the phone, it's going to automatically create that frame and also create the name for the frame. Figma will name the frame based off the type of device. And you can also select that frame name and rename it any way you like. So frames are really great for creating content or putting your content inside. So how do you use a frame? So if I have many frames selected, I can see all the properties associated with this frame. I can see the fill. I can add in different fill if I want to. I can see like its positioning. I can see its size. Basically, this is the majority of the stuff that you're going to basically see with a frame. Now, to create a frame, you can do a couple of different things. So say if I have a couple of different items, so I am going to create some squares. So I'm going to take the rectangle tool and hold on shift while I'm dragging to make a square. And we make a copy. So I have two squares here. Let's make them blue squares. So we have two blue squares here. Now you can take two items and actually select them and group them as a frame. The easiest way to do that is either click one and hold shift and click the other. And you can do this until you decide not to do it and select a bunch. Or you can just drag over and you would select Command Option and G, that is for Mac OS. You can also do the same with Control Alternate G on Windows. So that's how you group the frame. And that is the easiest way for that. Now, if I wanted to take this frame away, I'm just going to just press Shift Command G, which is actually the same or a similar command to which is on Windows, which is Shift Control G. So I have selected that now. The frame is disappeared. So I like to put frames within frames just as containers to hold my content. And you're going to see how I do that later. Okay, so you may be wondering, you have frames which are really important. Then you have groups and they may seem really similar. So if I take two items here, I'm going to hold down Shift and do it. I'm just going to press Ctrl G on Windows. So I'm just going to create a group. You can also select whether you want it to be a frame up here. You can toggle between the two. Now, there is a couple of different use cases for group versus frames. Frames are really great for a lot of things. I personally like to use groups for shapes, whether that is like a logo, because when you go to select a group and you scale it all, the content basically returns its dimension of the group. So it's going to shrink within every single way it's going to scale with it. And that's really helpful for logos or little elements that you have on the screen. So that is really helpful for that. Now, if I were to do that with a frame, you're going to notice that this is different. See, the frame acts like a box, and you can have the same desired effect that a group has with a frame, but it's going to be basically be a little bit harder. You're going to have to select the items within and adjust the constraints accordingly. So over here, I have the box and I'm going to set it to maybe left and right and top and bottom. That means that when the frame moves left and right, it's going to move with it. So let's look at the difference between this one versus this one. So I'm going to make this one red, so it's just easier to know which one has the constraints set. So the blue one has the constraint set, and I'm just going to move it around. You see how that kind of takes on the same type of movement as the larger frame, whereas the red one is just kind of sticking there because right now it's set to left and top. So if I were to move the left side or the top, it's going to stick. So groups are really great because when you want to retain like the size of the larger group that those items are a part of. So I like to use them for shapes and things like logos and those types of vectors. Now, if I want to ungroup, that's really easy. You just use the shift command, basically the same thing as ungrouping a frame. And for Windows, that is shift control G. So command G or control G, shift command G, shift control G. And that is how you create and remove groups. I want to talk about the basic shapes and Boolean operations because these are some pretty cool things that you can do in Figma. So let's jump right in it. So up here in our toolbar, we're going to have our shapes and we can basically see all our shapes. We'll see our rectangle, our line, arrow, ellipse, polygon star, and they are associated with shortcuts on the left hand side. So an example is the rectangle. If I just press arrow, I have selected and I can draw a rectangle. Basically, we will be able to create both rectangles and square. Now, if I select L, I have the line tool and I can make horizontal lines like that. Or I can make some vertical lines. I'm holding shift because if I hold shift, I can create squares. That are actual squares instead of rectangles. If I hold shift here, I can basically create lines that are very straight and not on the angle. So if I want a vertical rule like that or a vertical rule like that, I will hold shift to do that. We have arrows. So to do that, we hold shift. So you can draw an arrow like this. Turn that into a white arrow and you can set the setting here. Whether that's like a triangular, you can set like the back, but it's like a little circle. You can set the stroke, so you can create arrows also within Figma, which is really helpful. You can also create ellipses in circles. So I'm going to press 0 and 0. It's going to allow me to do that so that you can create ovals. And if you hold shift, you'll be able to create circles. And this can be used as they are or manipulated to create custom shapes with curved lines. So you can create a pie chart like that. You know, some pretty cool stuff. I'm just going to go back. You see this little dot pop up this arc. You can create your pie chart. Really, really cool. I created like a little Pac-Man there. Can you see? But really cool features that Figma has released here. And we have the polygon. Polygon does not have a shortcut, so we are just going to select that now. The polygon tool allows you to draw an enclosed shape that is made up of any numbers of straight lines. So I'm just going to draw, and the default one right now is the triangle, but I can adjust the radius. I can also adjust the count to make like hexagons and so on, and octagon, and yeah. So I mean, you can really create so many pretty cool shapes just with the polygon tool. And then we have the star tool, which is really cool as well. And it functions very much like the polygon tool. So if I take this, I can make it a little more chunkier. I can make the radius a little bit more softer. And then I can increase the count or decrease the count. So lots of cool different shapes that can come out of both the polygon and the star tool. And let's talk about the Boolean operations. So we have the union tool. I'm going to press 0 and get the ellipse by holding down shift, and I'm going to make another one. So now I have both of these layers. So as you can tell, this one is over this one. And if I want to make like a moon, I can select both. And here I have my Boolean operations. I can merge them together so that your union, so I have these two circles actually. Let me just grab a square as well. Like we can make some pretty unique things. So I have my square here or a rectangle. I'm going to just pick a new color for it so that there's my new color. So that's my new color. I'm going to select both and go to Boolean operations. So the union selection. So what this does is to combine the shapes into like a group. So it doesn't matter what's overlapping. It will essentially just become like a group like this. You're going to basically take the color from the overlapping shape in this instance. Now I'm going to undo that. And let's look at the next one. We have the subtract. Now subtract is basically the opposite of union. It removes the area of your shape or set of shapes from the shape on the button. Only the button layer is solid and the rest are subtracted from it. So let's see it. So we have like a half circle here. Now the next one is the intersect selection. Now this one is actually really interesting because the intersect creates a group where the shape consists only of the overlapping parts of the layers. So do you see how only this is going to show up when I select that intersect selection? And the last one is excluded. That's right here. And exclude is essentially the opposite of intersect. Exclude only shows the areas of its sublayers that do not overlap. And that is how you use shapes and Boolean operations. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to talk about images within Figma. So we're going to use a ton of images. I mean, it's just the way it is. Whether it's for a product image, whether it's just for landing page images. I mean, there are so many reasons why we are going to use images. I'm not going to get into that because I think you all know now the ways we can add images to our file. It varies. I personally like using plugins, and I will explain what plugins are after. But the two main ways that I personally like to do it is through copy and pasting. And there is a drag and drop. Then there is a third way, which is essentially important, which is importing the image through the file browser. So I'm going to show you the easiest way to do it. An example is, say you are in another file. So I'm in this file and I see this image that I really like. I can just copy it by pressing Command C or Control C. And then going back to my other tab and then pasting it with Command V or Control V. And that image is going to show up here. Now you can also access that file on your desktop and you can drag it to right into the canvas. And that's going to be totally fine as well. You can do this with everything with frames. You can do it with groups, anything from one file to the other. You can basically do that. So as you can tell, I just pasted the whole frame in here. So I'm just going to delete this. I'm actually going to use the other way to get one of the pictures I want in here. So if I use the rectangle tool and go down to place image, you will see the shortcut and you will see that you can click this button and it's going to prompt you to select the image that you want. So that's how you get a picture into your file through importing it. Now you can edit your picture in so many different ways. Let's take a look over here to our design tab on the right sidebar. Now you can scale it. So if I want to adjust it, you will notice that the image is just kind of filling the container. It's kind of acting like a frame in a way. It is pretty interesting. And that is why I like using pictures like this in Figma. So you can just size it like that. You can also hold shift and size it. It's all going to size up well. So if you want to retain that original ratio of the image that you had before, you can also just adjust things like the radius. You can adjust things like if it's rotated here. You can even do that here by just spinning it. You see this little angled cursor I have now? Now I can just take it for a spin. So that's really easy. And the other things that I really like about images is the settings right here within the field. So you can see it's set to fill, and that's why it's moving like this. But if I set that to fit, it's going to fit basically, whether fitting horizontally or vertically. It's fitting the top and the bottom. But if I shrink it or make it more skinnier, it's going to keep the original ratio of the image and it's going to just fit the width. And when you have cropped it, now the problem with crop though is like when you go to move it in a different way, now it's not going to keep the same aspect of the ratio for the actual image and you're going to be great. So I'm just going to go back. So we have a crop and we also have type, a tile. So if your image doesn't span, I don't really use tile at all. Probably could be useful for patterns. I personally use fill a lot and sometimes crop depending on the images, especially with like landing pages. So that's how you can adjust some of the different types of cropping and positioning. You can also set different things like the exposure if you really want to get into some editing, the contrast, the saturation. I know I'm making this look really bad, but I just showing you all the different things you can do with the image. You know, shadows. You can also set the blend mode over here, and you have multiple or darken. So if you want to do a little bit of Photoshop stuff, you can do that as well with some of the layers. The other great thing I really love about Figma is that you can actually come here into the fill and adjust and add. Like for example, if I want to add, let's say a gradient, I can do that. I can just add a new layer, go up here, set it to like solid, set to 100%. Then you can start playing around with it. And yeah, you can make your own gradients if you want. So here I can just make like a white gradient that slowly goes into white up here. So that is another thing you can do with some of these Figma files over here, which is really, really interesting. And that is how you use images in Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to talk about how to get started with text. Now, text is really easy to use. First thing I'm just going to do is to make things easier for everyone to see. I'm going to press F and create a frame. I'm just going to use one of the frames over here. So we have our frame now. We have their text tool, and now you can just press T to get that tool and you'll be already equipped with it. So if I zoom in here, I'm going to go right in it. So what I'm using, you will notice I can zoom in pretty easy because I'm using the command plus over here. The shortcut, you use what is best for you. That's how I like to just quickly zoom in and out. I love using the shortcuts, and the easiest way to create a text layer is just by pressing down. So there's the layer. It's showing up on my left side. And if I say hello, welcome, Mona, maybe this is like the intro of a text to an app. So I have just created the text layer. One thing we are going to do is we are going to jump right into here. This is what is available for you now. These are the properties for text layer. So we have learned how to create a text layer. Now we can resize text layers, but the problem is, it's little hard to resize text layers. So they don't necessarily shrink, but the content will go to the next line. If you drag it below, that may get things messed up. And the easiest way to reset once you have done something like this is to either press one of this, so you can set auto width, which would mean that it's just going to go based off the width of the content. Or you can set an auto height, but it's going to basically cut it at a fixed width. So now I have created this width. It can still build below. Like you are noticing right now, but it's not like totally uncontrolled when it comes to like how we are initially resizing it. So that's how you resize. So I'm just going to keep it like this for now here, where it's just like a totally automatic. And let's take a look at some of the text properties. So I have my font. I have the font weight. So I'm going to use like a bold on this one. Maybe a little too bold, only semi-bold. And we have our font size. So I'm going to set that up like 48. No, too huge. Let's get down to 24, okay? We have the spacing between letters. So if I set that like 4%, you see how the letters basically are more spread apart. So I'm going to undo that because I think they're fine right now. We can set also the line height. I like to go based off of percentage. So I like 115% for headings, maybe 125 to 150% for the body copy. And I'm going to make a copy below for this, just so you all can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to actually use some filler text. So I'm going to use a plugin really quickly so I can grab some of that text. So I'm grabbing the text and I'm going to give it like a 4 sentence. I'm going to give it 4 sentences. Let's use 4 sentences. So you can see now it's being filled with 4 sentences. It's really long, Gabby. Yeah, it's long. Let's just manage that for now. So I'm going to have to shrink that text. So there is my text. Yeah, this is my text. I want it to pop up. Now I'm going to bring it to 150%. So the spacing between the lines is better, looks better. And set it to regular. Now we also have paragraph spacing. I've already talked about some of the resizing options here. You can make the stem center aligned. That means putting them in the middle. This is just alignment. Right align, left align. You can have an example as if I have set the height fixed. You can adjust where the text aligns there. Another interesting thing is that you can go even into more details by pressing that more icon over here, and you can set the resizing in here. You can also make it justified for an alignment. You can have underlining or strike through. You can have paragraph spacing and indents in list styles. Yes, Figma now supports list styles, which is great. You can always specify the case style. So really great for like things like subheadings. You can always use it for subheadings. It works really well. So that is what is available to you when it comes to the properties for text. Now I have two text layers here. Yeah, pretty cool, right? Two text layers over here, pretty cool. And that didn't take us long. And you'll be just zipping through all of this really quickly once you get your hand on the text. Because text is one of the big types of UI elements that we're going to use a lot of. Now, I'm just going to just quickly demonstrate list items. So if you do have a list items, I'm just going to go to the very front of my list items and just dash into space, and it's automatically going to create a list item for me. So you can create a bunch of them. I'm just going to paste them, and you can set what type of list items they are, whether they are number list or bullet list. So Figma also allows you to adjust the feel of the text as well. So you can do that all over here in this little fill panel. And that is how you use text in Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to talk about constraints. Now, constraints are really important. If you're using regular frames, I will get into that right now. So let's jump right in it. So I'm going to press F to get my frame. And I'm just going to pick any frame. I'm just going to pick this one over here. So now that our frame is in place, what we're going to do is we're going to place some items in there. Now, I'm just going to press arrow to get a rectangle. I'm going to place one rectangle here, and I'm going to place another rectangle below it. Now, I have two rectangles, so constraints tells Figma how layers should respond when you resize the frames. So let's take a look here. If I'm going to resize my frame, you will notice that the layer beneath doesn't actually move. Now, this really helps you control how design look across different screen and sizes and device. So there are two types of constraints. You have horizontal constraints and vertical constraints. Constraints are located over here on the right sidebar. You can see it. So these are horizontal and these are vertical constraints. You will notice that it says left and this one says stop. That means that when I move the left side, they're going to move with it. And if I move the top side, they're going to move as well. Now, I want to set it to the left and right. And I will leave that one at top. Now, let's see what happens to this rectangle. When I resize the frame, you will notice that now it shrinks and grows. So that's pretty awesome. You can even do it in this way as well. So I'm going to leave that one at left, and I'm going to the top and bottom for the vertical constraints. You will notice that now it shrinks up and down. You can even do things such as, let's move this one just a little bit lower. For vertical constraints, you can do center. So that means it's just going to stay kind of in one place. Watch. So it centers itself. You can do this even for horizontal constraints as well. You can do scale. This is great if you want something to grow. So notice how the rectangle is going to grow in height and in width as you grow the frame. Pretty cool, right? You can apply constraints to any layer within a frame. It's not possible to apply constraints to layers outside of a frame. So if we now have this layer, I'm just going to create copy. So I'm going to do Command or Control C and go click outside the frame. And I'm going to press Command V and Control V would be for Windows. And I would just drag that right outside the frame. So you notice how it doesn't have the constraints. on the side like it did within the regular frame. That is because it is not within a frame. You can only apply constraints within a frame or layers within an auto frame. So layers within an auto layered frame and layers outside of a regular frame will have constraints. Only regular frames will have constraints. Sometimes though, you do want to resize the frame with resizing the items within. And the way to do that is to ignore the constraints, and the shortcut to hold is Command for Mac and Control window. Mac and Control for Windows. So let's take a look. So I'm going to resize this again. This is to set to a scale. I'm just going to leave it so you will notice that, okay, now I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to hold Command and I can do at any point. See, I'm holding a command now and it will be controlled for a Windows users. Now the items within are not moving. They're not moving. Let me just move this particular one out of the frame there. But as soon as I start to let go of that shortcut, things start to scale again. And that is how you use constraints within Figma. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're going to get into how to use auto layout. So all the layout is a feature that is essentially part of regular frame. So let's jump right in it. I'm going to press F to get my frame list, and then I'm going to just select the first one just for the sake of our demonstration. So I'm going to rename this, and to rename it is quickly. You can press Command arrow or Control arrow and arrow. I'm just going to call this my auto layout frame. And I'm just going to shrink it just a bit. And I'm going to create another frame below it. And I'm just going to call this my regular frame. So everyone can see the difference. Now, auto layout frames are really great. If you want to have a like responsiveness part of it, if you want to essentially make sure that like you can build some nice list, it's really great for even, creating like buttons that are responsive. So I'm just going to get into it quickly in this demonstration. So I'm going to create a rectangle or a square. It doesn't matter. I'm going to place it inside both of these frames. Now, when we look at the regular frame, you know everything as we learned before about frames. But now, let's turn this into an auto layout frame over here. So, I'm going to click the frame. And I'm going to go over to the Properties panel over on the right. On the right sidebar and the Design panel. You will notice auto layouts if you click that little plus button right over there. Now it's in an auto layout frame. I will get into what all this means in quick seconds. But this allows you to adjust padding and between items. And the padding between that is horizontal and vertical. So if I were to say add another item, like let me add another rectangle, you can just copy and paste it. You notice how the whole frame grows, and if I add more, the frame keeps on growing, and you can even adjust how the framework of the direction if you want. If you want it to go vertical or horizontal. And there are many more details here. You can even nest orderly frames within frames. So I'm just going to move this one down like here. And if you press Command C or Command V or Control C or Control V, it doesn't adjust the frame, as you can see. So all the layout frames are really great for responsiveness. So let's jump right in it. So we have another frame that I want to create. So I'm going to just create two frames of two. So one and two, and then another frame. So I'm going to select these ones over here. I'm going to hold on shift and I'm going to right click. And if we go down, we can see that we can turn it into an auto layout. So we can add auto layout. That is another frame. So you can see it right here clearly. It's applied as well. And I'm going to do the same over here. Right click. Okay. And it's a shift A as the shortcut, as you notice over here. This allows me to nest frames within frames. And this is really powerful for layouts. We'll be using this in a certain demonstration as well. But if I know to say change the direction, if you want to change the direction, we're not going to have four vertically. No, we're going to have those two frames stuck onto one another. And you can see how they're nested below. So we have two rectangles up and up top, and two rectangles at the bottom. And you can make some pretty cool grids. And you can even nest another frame within this frame if you wanted to. And the easiest way to add new items, you can copy and paste. Copy and paste. You can also duplicate, as in duplicate it, make it more than two, which is easy to do by pressing the Command D or Control D, which will duplicate your last action. So I'm just going to go back with the Command C, and you can also reorder the object. So I'm just going to change the color here really quickly. If I use my arrow keys, I can order the object within a frame and even the frame within the other frame. So you can reorder things really quickly and fast just using your arrow keys. That's why they're very important. Or you can click and drag. Just be careful not to drag it outside the frame. You don't want that. And if I really wanted to, if I wanted to hide them or delete them, I can do that as well. So I hide them like that. You can hide them like that. This is the best way to hide them if you want. Or I can just delete it and it's gone. And that is how you use auto frames in the most basic sense of all. Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to get a little bit more into the details of using auto layout within Figma. So, auto layout is, like I said, a great tool for creating some responsive designs. But there's a lot of different things that we need to learn about in order to use it effectively. So I'm going to create another frame. So here's my nice frame here, and we are just going to call this our auto layout frame. Perfect. Now I'm going to take another rectangle and just going to place it inside my frame. Now I'm going to go to auto layout over here on the right sidebar, and now I have created an auto layout frame. I'm just going to duplicate another rectangle within the frame so that we have two rectangles to work with. Actually, let's just do three as well. So I press Command D. You can even use Control D. So let's jump right in it. So our little frames are really good. I mean, you can create buttons to grow or shrink as you edit the text label. You can build lists that adapts as an item and are added, removed, or hidden. You can combine auto layout with frames to build complete interfaces. So like cards, you have like a card portion with the like button that's in there. You have text in another frame. Mind you, the button is probably its own auto layout frame. And then you have the image that is as a frame as well. So you can build these complete interfaces. just with nesting, all these auto layout frames. Now let's talk about the different properties within an auto layout frame. So selecting my frame right here, I'm going to go to the right here. You can see and select the direction. This is the direction you can do, a horizontal or a vertical, and the direction describes the way the auto layout frame will actually flow. So I'm just choosing a vertical for now. You can choose the spacing between items, which is over here. So this is 10 pixels, but let me choose 24. That's perfect. You can adjust the spacing between using canvas controls or spacing fields in this right sidebar. Now you can do it this way manually like that, or you can just go over there. Now padding is another very important part. The padding is going to be your horizontal padding, which you see over here, and your vertical padding. And you can adjust that by either dragging it. I'm just going to select 24. You can even do that manually by using the canvas. Now the padding is essentially the empty white space between the boundary of an auto layout frame and the frame's child objects. So think of frames as like a parent, and these are our little children within them. So like I mentioned, you can set padding uniformly, which is like selecting 24 and 24 here. And you can also go into the nitty gritty details and just select buttons and padding to be 12 and left padding to be 8 or something like that. It really depends on your use case here. Now, the other thing that I haven't mentioned is alignment. Now, you need to choose how to align child objects within an auto layout frame. Both the direction of an auto layout frame and the distribution will determine what alignment options you have available. So, with that being said, say I had a couple of different objects like this, and I'm going to change the direction like that. You can see this is where you can choose the alignment. If I had them to be centered, aligned to the bottom, the middle. This is the middle. This is the middle bottom, bottom right. You can choose all these different options for your directions. If I wanted to say make one wider, then you'll start seeing the difference here. So that's how alignment works. You notice that the frame now doesn't go back, and that's because it's not set to hug a content. Let's talk a bit now about resizing. This is resizing up here. Now, one of the most powerful functions of auto layout is the ability to control the dimensions of the objects in an auto layout frame. So, there are different types of ways you can resize. You can make it fixed or hug and fill. So let's take a look over here. This is set to fixed. That means it has a fixed width of 218 pixels. I'm going to fill the container. That means it's going to fill all the way across. And the amazing thing is, if you want to create frames that are responsive, look at the top layer in comparison. Look at the top layer and you can see the comparison to the two bottom layers. Those rectangles are set to fixed. Say I want my frame just to hug the width of the content within. Now it's hugging the maximum width. These are still set to fixed. Now this one is still set to fill. You can have one set the fixed like this, and then this one set to fill as well. So that is how resizing works. It's really powerful. Now you can still apply constraints to the orderly frame itself. If it's nested within a regular frame, the constraint section and the resizing options will appear, allowing you to really set those options if you need to. So let's take a look here. So you will notice if I select this, my constraints doesn't show up because it's an auto layout frame. Again, my constraints are not here because I'm going to create a new frame. If I take this in, throw it inside this frame by just dragging it over, and I'm going to set a stroke so we can see where it is. I'm going to center it. Now my constraints are showing up here. You can set this to anything you would like. So I'm going to set left and right here. That's fine for now. Now it is available. I am actually going to select all of these items, and you can do that quickly by pressing shift and holding them, or control A or command A. And I'm going to set them all to fill container. And now we're going to see how responsive this gets. So you can still build responsive interfaces even with irregular frames combined with auto layout frames. This is a really great way to show how you can build some really great interfaces. And that's how you use auto layout frames. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to talk about plugins. So I have this nice little card here that I designed using some auto layouts. You can see that we have some nested containers in here, and there's a couple of things missing here. I don't have a nice image. I don't have title copy, but copy here. So I really don't know what to say. This is just going to be a placeholder, but ultimately I need some stuff to fill in my card. Now, you may be wondering, like, what does this have to do with plugins? Well, the good thing is Figma offers plugins, and those plugins are created by the community ultimately. They're going to help you increase your workflow. So you're not going to make think about it on important things like which image needs to go here or there, and what type of copy do I need to think about here. You can think about all that important stuff afterwards, and you can just worry about design. So plugins are essentially these third-party scripts or type of applications that extend the functionality that Figma has to offer. You can use these plugins to customize your experience or create more efficient workflow in Figma, and that goes the same way for FigJam too. So I'm going to do is I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to the community page over here. Now I'm going to just do a text search, and I know what type of plugins I want for imagery. I'm just going to search up on Splash now. This is really a great plugin, and I suggest everyone gets it as well. Now, here we go, and go to the plugins tab up here, and here it is. I installed it already. So when you find the plugin that you want, you can either go to the page, or you can go to that list page that we were just on. And once again, you can read all the contents here. You can go to the actual website, any comments, versions, history, all that important information is going to be here. And then you just click that little install button, which I have done, and it will be installed. Now you may be thinking, what do I do now? Well, the good news is you don't have to do much. All you have to do is go back to your file, give it a right click, and then you'll notice I have Unsplash here, and I have to Lorem Ipsum plugin. You may be wondering what that is, so let's just use that one first. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click onto my text file, my text layer. Go into my plugins and go to Lorem Ipsum. Now, this specific plugin, this is what it looks like. So I don't want to close it after generating the text. I don't really want to begin with lorem ipsum. This is going to give me some placeholder text. So I just want two words, and there's just the title. It allows me to just fill up my card with easy placeholder stuff. So I'm going to use around three paragraphs. Oh, not paragraphs, sorry, three sentences. That will be way too long, okay? I'm going just to resize that to fill the container. And whoops, there we go. So I'm just going to close that plugin. I'm going to go over to here and space that out. And that's the line height at 150%. And there we go. Now we have some placeholder text. Now let's use our other plugins so we don't really have to select anything for our other plugin just yet. At least we're going to go into our plugins. I'm going to select Unsplash. Here it is, perfect. I love this plugin. This is one of my favorite ones. It gives me my great imaginary without, like, it gives me really great imagery, sorry, without having to worry too much. So I'm going to go into my search and I'm just going to find something abstract. Let's see. So it's going to give me a bunch of different options here, and that is what um, we're going to select a rectangle. So this is a rectangle there. You can use use a frame layer, but ultimately what we're going to do is when you select this layer and select an image that you like, let's first find something that we like. There are lots of different options here. I think I'm going to go with, let's go with this. Let's go with this. So I'm going to select it, and what it's going to do is it's going to appear in the fill panel. So I'm going to keep the rectangle, but now I can just remove this other field because I don't need it. I just keep this one here, and there you go. Then I can close this. If I didn't want to put it in here, I can just select that image that I want and just going to appear in my canvas. And then I can do whatever I would like to it. I could place that inside. I can place that inside my card. So you can do it that way to steal an image layer. But yeah, that is how you use the Unsplash plugin and the Lorem Ipsum plugin. Remember, try to use the plugins are going to work for you. So try and use it. It will definitely work for you. They're going to be really great for making you create some more efficient workflows in Figma.